This is Joyful, Happiness Movement and Podcast. I discover the science behind happiness and well-being, and through sharing stories, I am searching for the secrets to a happier life. You can find two types of episodes on our platforms, guest series and solo episodes. In our guest series, I will be meeting with experts who share their knowledge or experiences, contributing to a better understanding of a happier life. The solo episodes are divided into series of 5 episodes in each series, as in each episode I will talk about a topic related to one of the 5 pillars of happiness that we've designed at Joyful. If you're curious to know what are those 5 pillars, I invite you to check out our Instagram page. I hope you're ready, as it's time to be joyful. Today I speak to Jasper Riehm, a passionate guerrilla gardener who tries to connect people living in urban spaces with nature, putting up willow domes around the city of Amsterdam. Previously, Jasper has been working as a chef in the US, cooking in Michelin-starred restaurants, but he decided to quit, to live a slower life closer to his friends and family and closer to his heart. On Instagram, he calls himself that weird plant guy, as he questions the established norms on what is normal, inviting people to get involved and make an impact on their surroundings. We had a wonderful time talking. Jasper believes that people who get along with each other are part of a shared mycelium network, sharing positive vibes and creating impact. Listen to our conversation and let us know if you're a part of our mycelium too. Jasper, I got to know you during the TED Talk that she gave in Geneva, and I thought that this was super inspiring, what you've talked about. You've talked about the projects in which you're involved with related to guerrilla gardening. And this would be the topic of our today's conversation. But before we dive into this, I wanted to ask you, in general, how was it for you to have this TEDx Geneva experience?
How was it for me? Well, so there was a couple of interesting moments. Like the build up before, didn't really feel like it was going to happen. Funny enough, I didn't tell any of my friends or my family. There's this expression called evil eye, where like if somebody sees something that you have that they want, that they could actually unintentionally or intentionally wish that away from you. So I didn't tell anybody initially, and then um, it really wasn't until like the week before the TED Talk that I was like, oh, I'm actually doing, like, I'm in Switzerland. I'm practicing my TED Talk. Um, the first interview, like kind of thing where I had like an idea of what I was going to talk about, um, I completely bombed. Like I lost all of my words. I wasn't myself. They were like, where's Jasper? And so that was really interesting. And then eventually went back, worked on my speech, got comfortable, and then they were like, "Great, we see it. All right."
Okay. And how does it work? So who contacted you first? Was it like you have to apply somewhere, or they just find you and they propose it to you? Is there like a committee that would decide whether you're
Kind of. I was very lucky. Funny enough, the guerrilla gardening is what got me the gig. The one of the organizers, she actually guerrilla gardened a little area in front of her house because of watching one of my videos.
Oh, that's
Like, it
nice.
inspired her, and then she was like, "Oh, shit, this is an idea worth spreading. Let me reach out to this guy." Um, we vibed and then just continued to work on, it together,
Mhm.
and she gave me a lot of space. And then for the interview itself, just to jump back to the first question, I have no recollection of me on the stage. Uh, I,
Yeah,
like,
this
maybe
is
remember, like,
often
2
the case.
tidbits of, like,
Yeah.
making eye contact with somebody, but, like, it was just like, okay, I guess it happened because there's a video recording and I remember it happening, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I think it was really great.
thanks.
So in this TED Talk, you talked about how first you became a chef, and then you
Mhm,
kind of transitioned into gardening. So first, I just wanted to talk a bit about your day job as a chef and
mhm,
how did that happen? What kind of chef are you?
mm,
Especially because I have been currently I'm currently reading a book about kind of cuisine and food.
What
It's
book?
called Gastrophysics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Oh,
It's
no.
by Charles Spence, who is a scientist. He's working at University of Oxford, and he's working on multisensory experiences. And so
Mm,
he's focusing on how eating is a multisensory experience. And so how it's not really just about the taste and also about the misconceptions that we have. For instance, that taste is only in our mouths, where actually it's not. It's like also in our noses. So the smells are really important. But then he focuses on all these other factors that contribute to our experience of a meal. So, for
mm,
instance, the visuals of it, but also the texture, then also the sounds that accompany the eating, also about the beliefs that we have about the things that we eat. And so he also talks about how in the Michelin stars starred restaurants, the chefs would kind of take all that in, and they would like experience those culinary. They would invent those culinary experiences, you know.
mhm.
And so I was wondering, since you're a chef, is this something that you've kind of tried to explore? Is this something that you've heard of?
Hmm.
Do you think that the cuisine is actually now like following this kind of path? What is your view on this?
Well, I mean, originally I became a chef with this obsession around flavors, and it's actually the movie Ratatouille that
Mhm.
inspired me to be a chef. There's this
Yeah,
one scene where he's describing the flavor of a strawberry and the flavor of cheese, and how one has like one note, and another has a totally different
yeah.
note. When you mix those two together, then you create this whole symphony. Um, that was initially what sort of like was my catalyst to becoming a chef. And then, yeah, halfway through being like between now and then, I sort of wanted to know a little bit more about where my food came from. Growing up in the city, started in, and I also kind of felt helpless in the kitchen. You know, like you're
Mhm.
just working with what you have. I did have one of these very pivotal experiences at Blue Hill at Stone Barn. It's Dan Barber's restaurant. He's kind of like one of the people in America who started the farm to table movement,
Mhm.
and it's this beautiful farm that he like renovated and turned into a Michelin star restaurant. But one thing that I thought was so interesting with that experience was the food itself was like very simple. It was like maybe like a carrot with like a sauce, but there was this whole story that went along with it because you're in this farm. At one point, they take you out of the table, they make you walk around the farm, they sit you at a different table,
Okay.
and you're eating these things that, like, are not all that special, it's just like a salad, but because you've seen now where that lettuce was picked or where the carrot was grown and the guy fanning the fish that you're about to eat, you know, so, like, this relationship,
Mhm.
to where your food came from is sort of that became my new obsession, not so
Okay.
much,
It's called farm at the table. Yes, this
far
concept.
farm to table,
Ah,
so, like,
farm to
straight from
table.
the farm
Okay.
to the table.
Okay.
um
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, Dan Barber and Alice Waters were, like, 2 very important people
Mhm.
in the movement.
Okay.
But, like, I also get asked a lot of times, like, "What kind of food do you like to cook?" It's, like, one of the most cliché questions that chefs get
Mhm.
asked, but I always like to think, like, the food I like to cook is the same food I like to eat, which is
Mhm.
food with a soul, and, like, you can go to a Michelin star restaurant and have food that's, like, amazing because you have this whole backstory and it pays homage to all this history. Or you can go to a Michelin star restaurant and it's like meticulously plated food and it tastes like nothing. And, you know, so that became my obsession and that
Mhm.
snowballed into me being in the garden where food comes from. And
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
one obsession to
Interesting.
another.
And then I think because you've worked right in a Michelin star restaurant, but
Hmm.
you've decided to abandon this.
Yeah.
So why is it?
I don't know. Something about work life balance, something about never seeing your family and not being able to celebrate your birthday. I mean,
Where was it?
For the last, like when I was in America for the last 10 years, I was working in Michelin star restaurants,
Mm.
and the majority of people's birthdays, holidays, you know, like maybe, yeah, like Christmas, it would be one of the exceptions. But I always felt like, you know, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like I
Okay.
was always hosting these beautiful dinners, but I never actually got to sit down and eat.
Mhm.
And then I made sort of a transition from Michelin star uh, kitchens to working in corporate catering.
Mhm.
So I worked for Google for a while in New York, and then when I came over here, I worked for Microsoft, um,
Mm.
which yeah,
Yeah.
it
Why
led
did
me to
you?
some flexibility.
And why did you choose to move to Europe, to Amsterdam in particular?
Amsterdam in particular, it was really like just a feeling. I remember when I came here like 10 years ago, just on like a Euro trip, I fell in love with the city and I spoke with my then ex, or my then partner. Uh, what if we moved here just like as a joke, and we came here on a vacation, and on that vacation we even like did an apartment viewing just for fun.
Yeah,
And then
cool.
we could really see ourselves, like, living here, and it was always this pipe dream, and then COVID happened, and our lease was up in March, and then we were like, "Should we just do it?" And then we did,
Mm.
and that was 3 years ago.
Okay, cool. Um, all right. So yeah, so you're keeping the job as a chef as kind of your day job, but then you're
Mhm,
mostly engaged in this guerrilla gardening projects. Could you tell me a bit more about this transition that you've made? So you've mentioned that it started with a farm to table restaurant, right? But
mhm,
so where did you even first start uh, gardening? So how did you learn to garden?
mhm.
What was this process like?
Yeah, so I was really lucky that, my parents also had a place right outside the city, so I grew up in, like, the heart of Manhattan in the Lower East Side, and then, like, I think I was around, like, 5 when we got a place, just outside the city, like, 2 hours outside the city, which has a lot more nature. So I got my exposure therapy there to
Mhm.
nature. And then it wasn't until like I realized when I was older that like people in cities don't always have access to something like this. And I was really yearning for that because now I'm in the restaurant industry. I don't have time to go 2 hours away to enjoy nature. So like where can I find that in the city? And then I found this community garden that was right in front of my house, right in front of my nose. Um,
It
and
was
then
still in the
realized
US, right?
this is in the US,
Yeah.
yeah, in Williamsburg in Manhattan.
Hmm.
And every time I went to that garden, something magical would happen. Like there was just like a whether it was an interaction with a human or an interaction with a bird or just like finding out something new with nature. And I think there was this sort of like kid in a candy store type situation where like I hadn't had that much exposure to nature. I didn't grow up with the family that gardens for their food or anything like that. So
Yeah.
when I saw like, oh, a zucchini has a flower that looks like this, and then it turns into a zucchini, it was just like, wow, that's crazy, and got
Hmm.
kind of obsessed with the seeing where everything comes from and the joy that that brought me. I kind of wanted to find a way to give that to like kids who are growing up in the city
Hmm.
who don't get that kind of exposure. And I was like, what if that exposure happened earlier on in
Hmm.
life? How would that affect?
And so, what you conducted some projects to learn children how to grow plants and
Mhm.
gardening? Yes.
Yeah, well, so it would vary for like, I work with like 3 or 4 year olds who, don't have a lot of dexterity, but like they would pick herbs and then we'd make little mini pizzas from it.
Mm.
And like the excitement they'd have would be like, look at the herbs that I
Yeah.
got. Like it was really amazing. And then one thing that I referenced in my TED talk was the dumpling class that I did. And that really solidified that like what I was doing was I was kind of onto something because the way that these teenagers were handling the green onion where they were just so, unfamiliar with it. It was such a foreign thing to them to see like a vegetable growing in a garden, and I could relate to that because I'd also been like, "What the heck?"
Hmm.
But, yeah, I wanted to, like, kind of increase that relationship and going down that rabbit hole, and, then I moved to Amsterdam,
Hmm.
and, like, I mean, not everybody, but in Amsterdam, it's fairly common to just know how to garden. So
Okay.
all of this, "Wow, look how cool this is," like, if you put a seed in here and it's gonna grow, they're like, "Yeah, of course, yeah, we know that." So
Yeah, bravo.
yeah, so
Yeah.
now I had to push my evolution
Yeah.
of, "Alright, how do I get people to really get excited again
Mm.
about
Okay.
what they're doing?"
Yeah.
Um, and then we
Okay.
started working with willows as like a sort of weird coincidence.
Yeah. And okay, so you're now currently doing what is called the guerrilla gardening.
Mhm.
But then I can imagine that for some of our listeners, it might be new as a concept. I myself did not know about this notion. So could you perhaps say in a couple of words what is it, and maybe if you know where it came from?
Yeah, I actually don't know where it came from. I know that it was a movement, I think started in the '70s. But it's
Mhm.
something very simple. It's literally like if you were to take just some local varieties of flowers that grow in, say, the north of the Netherlands, you would take those and sprinkle them around your neighborhood without asking for permission and
Mhm.
just growing them in anywhere that there's a place.
Yeah.
Um, and one of the things that like really stuck with me, why I fell in love with Amsterdam when I first moved here, was I like guerrilla gardening is not a new concept for them at all. Like if you go when you walk through Amsterdam, you'll see plant pots just everywhere. Like you can't walk on the sidewalks because people put
Mhm.
so many plants on the street. And that is guerrilla gardening.
Yeah.
Just putting plants, giving a space for nature, not like going to the parks department and saying, "Hey, we want a bush here," and then 3 years later there's a bush.
Yeah.
Just like going out buying a bush and putting it in front of your house and being like,
Mm.
"This lives here now."
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like one of my main like goals with all of this, because it'd be very idealistic for me to be like, I'm gonna save the world by throwing some seeds around. But if there's a million people in this city, if every single one person put one plant outside their house, that's a million plants.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely. Mm.
that's the idea I would love to spread.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, I think. And then, so I actually did some research on guerrilla gardening in
Oh,
case
cool.
you did not know where it came from. And so, according to my information, well, there are different sources. I mean, some people say that it became first popularized by some hippies, also like in the 70s, and then also by the nomadic Roma populations. But then there is this artist, which name is Liz Christie, and she is said to popularize the idea of guerrilla gardening in the 70s, as she started to use kind of abandoned parts of New York, so East Village and Harlem, and create these green gardening spaces in the city out of something which was not really taken care of. So this is the origin of the idea, which I agree with you is truly amazing. And this is also why I thought that it would be really nice to have you here on this podcast, because I'm really in full admiration of people like you who just have an idea and an intrinsic motivation to do something, to kind of become an activist maybe. But yeah, so I was actually wondering what word could I use to best describe this kind of mindset that you have, and that I really admire in people, which is kind of about activism. But I think activism, I think, is quite political.
Yeah.
And what I was thinking about is more of like participation, where you kind of know that what you are is not simply like, you don't have only personal goals, and personal pursuits of pleasure and so on, but you're aware of the fact that you're actually part of something bigger, and that you can create something and other people might join, and that you can create an impact, right, on your surroundings and on your area. So this is why I think the project of guerrilla gardening and your story and such initiatives are truly worth spreading and worth talking about. Yeah, maybe so you could tell me if you think that guerrilla gardening can be considered a form of activism, which is very often political.
Hmm.
What is your view on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's an important factor in all of it. I don't think it's the one thing that's going to solve all of the problems. But there is this, like I had a moment actually with my friend yesterday where I was like, am I am I just a complete phony? Like, am I a fake? Like, everything I do has been done before, like making willow domes, guerrilla gardening, all of these ideas. I'm like, am I actually coming up with anything original? And my friend was like, while you might not be coming up with anything original, you are going out and doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem that people have. I had this one interaction with somebody who saw a plot in front of their house. It was just an empty tree plot, and they'd contacted the municipality. The municipality said we have to do soil tests. It's going to be another 2-3 years before we get a tree there. And then
Hmm.
she contacted me through Instagram, and I was like, "Fuck it, let's build a
Okay.
willow dome like right there." And then like 2-3 days later, we did. While we were building it, some random neighbor, no words, comes down and starts just helping us dig. Like,
Mm,
doesn't even
that's so
ask, "What are
nice.
you guys doing here?" And he just starts helping us dig. Like, and then it's like I think a lot of people, what they're looking for is just permission to just go out and do it.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what I want my work to inspire. It's just to give people more permission to go out
Mm.
because we're very fearful. And um, something I talk about with my friend is this idea of like tipping points. And if you
Mhm.
create enough momentum behind an idea like guerrilla gardening and normalize it, then it's so much easier to obtain, and
Yeah.
more people can join in. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. Oh, you can just find a plant, put it somewhere, and make that space more
Yeah.
beautiful with your own little actions. Uh,
And how did you first find the motivation to do it? Because I can imagine that, many people can have this idea in their heads, just like you said, but then
mhm,
there are a few who actually go out and do it. So what do
mhm.
you think was this motivating factor for you?
Yeah, I mean every project. I mean, not every project. It gets less and less now, but there's a lot of times where I'm building a project and like, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
why? I'm like collecting a bunch of sticks, putting it somewhere, and putting it together. There's this moment where I'm doubting like why I should just give up. Like this makes no sense. Um, but I think that's very intrinsic to the artistic process or creative process is to doubt what you're doing. I'm sure you've
Mhm.
had it with your podcast. You're like,
Of course.
why am I interviewing this guy? Like I don't know. But if you keep on pushing yourself
Mm.
to try to push the boundaries, um, then you get somewhere. Like the initial project itself, I do have to give credit to a friend of mine, Mamoon Nukumanu. We were friends and builders in New York, and then I moved to Amsterdam. Noticed that there's a bunch of willows
Mhm.
growing here, and willows can be quite hard to come by in New York, but here they just grow in the parks.
Mhm.
And then he said, "Hey, I'm going to be visiting in March." And he was like, "What if we just built something in the middle of Amsterdam?" And I knew this spot in front of my house that was like on the side of the canal.
Mhm.
And I went down, chopped down a bunch of trees, removed all the leaves. And I
Mhm.
remember being very nervous about the whole thing. But I think the best thing you can do is to find a friend. Like if you have an idea in your head, find a friend that you know will support you in that endeavor and get them excited about it. And then like I have my best friend Teo, who's like now my business partner. We've like started a kind of company called Rooted in Nature
Yeah.
together. And I wouldn't be able to do half of the things I do without his support. Not to say that like he does all the work or I do all the work or that I wouldn't have done this without him, but
Mhm.
it's 20 times easier when you have somebody else there being like, "Yeah, this is crazy and this is stupid, but like who else is going to do it? So we're
Yeah.
going to do it." Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like community, friends, it makes it easier to engage in these kind of projects. And
Mhm.
so, why did you decide to build those willow domes? I think you can do a bunch of stuff, right? You could
Mhm.
also like plant trees or grow tomatoes or plant sunflowers. So, why willow
Yeah.
domes in your case?
Willow Dome specifically, I think I like the idea of doing things that make you kind of question the status quo, that make you question the things that already exist. Like if we were to have, if we were to always see the same thing, like okay, park benches always look this way, we would just get in our mind, okay, park benches always are like this, they're always facing that way, and what have you. But then if you said, like, if you saw a park bench that's like set at an angle and just looks kind of out of place, um, like the reason why willow domes work for me is because it kind of makes people like stop and like think and wonder like why is that there? What is that thing that's doesn't necessarily fit
Mhm.
with like what my mind of a row of trees is supposed to look like. So there's a bit of anarchy that goes
Mhm.
into it, like a bit of like doing something different to challenge the status
Yeah.
quo and to keep
Yeah.
people
Yeah. Well,
guessing.
I think it's art, right?
Mhm,
Because it's an installation that you're doing, you're using nature, but eventually I think these are artistic installations, especially since like if you're saying that you really want to make people think and reflect upon the things that they think are established status quo. So I think it's simply artistic. And do you engage in other projects apart from the willow domes?
in which way?
Like, do you plant like vegetables and fruit on some community gardens, or are you creating gardens on the roofs? I think there are all kind of different things that you can do, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I still like to engage with just like regular gardens. I'll be honest, this does take up a lot of my energy and
Mhm.
time.
Yeah, of course.
Um, but like I think it's very it is important to kind of not pinhole yourself,
Mm.
into like because it even with what I do, my brain always immediately goes back to willows. I go, how can we incorporate willows? But there are so many different aspects. Like I was working with a food forest in Utrecht, and
Mhm.
part of the reason why it wasn't a productive food forest was because people didn't know how to utilize it. And so, how do we engage people with the
Yeah,
area? So, teaching cooking classes and that sort of thing.
amazing. Mm.
Um, yeah,
And
there's different avenues, but I would like to.
yeah, to
I wish I
explore
had
more.
multiple hands. I wish there were
Mm.
three of me, and then I could do
Yeah.
more.
And have you ever imagined starting guerrilla gardening that you would I don't want to say end up, but that you would continue working for such an initiative as Ozora Festival?
Oh, to like continue this
Yeah,
this
have you ever imagined that you would end up like doing things for big things like the installations for the Ozora Festival?
No, no, but one thing that doing the installation for Azora, um, and for, the people who haven't heard about it, I did this big project, 42-meter wide willow structure. We'll actually hopefully be going back this year to add on
Oh,
to it and make it
wonderful.
bigger. Yeah, yeah. I'm also doing another festival this year called Lago Lago, which is here in the
Hmm.
Netherlands.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I never imagined any of this.
Hmm.
But through doing the project with Azora, like specifically the Azora project, because it was so big and kind of like up in the air, like, is this actually going to happen? And then it did. I realized, like, man, you just have to have a good imagination. Like, you can do anything, you can manifest
Yeah.
anything into reality, but like, you have to have the imagination. Like, and
Mm.
I also can't take credit for that. It was a friend of mine, Gergely, who's from Hungary, who reached out to me through Instagram and said, "Hey, it would be great to do this together." And we manifested it into existence, which
Hmm.
like the whole time we're like
Wonderful.
looking at ourselves, are we qualified to
Hmm.
do this?
Hmm.
And it was sort of this thing of like, if not us, then who?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just challenge
Wonderful.
yourself. Have a good imagination. You can do
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then how do you find volunteers to help you with your work?
I use predominantly social media,
Hmm.
but I had an idea a couple months back to just start a WhatsApp group. Um, so like if you go to my Instagram page, you can go into my link in bio and join the WhatsApp group. And now I think it's 130 members.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it's really funny. Like we exchange now. It's become this little underground like WhatsApp group. I have a project tomorrow actually that on Monday I just decided my schedule opened up. I decided, okay, we're going to do this project this weekend. I was able to message this group of 130 people and say, hey, who wants to join me for this weekend? And I have like 14 volunteers
Hmm.
who are just coming out of the goodness of their hearts. And it's also really funny for me if anybody is listening, who wants to do something similar. There's a lot of times when I'm doing that and I'm standing around looking at all these people. I'm like, why are they all here?
Hmm.
Like, what's the what? Why are they here? Like, it's a very strange sensation. Like, I feel like I owe them something. But
Hmm.
people are thirsty for this kind of thing. And like
Yeah.
jumping back to what we talked about earlier, why do these things? How can other people do these things? You just have
Mm.
to have the courage to do it. And so many
Mm.
people are just looking for a person to say, "You have permission. Go do it. Let's do it together. Hold my hand."
Just a quick break. If you would like to engage in a small act of kindness yourself, go and follow us on Instagram. It will help us grow and develop this initiative. You can find us under the name Joyful, that's spelled with 10 U's. And if you're feeling particularly generous today, consider rating our podcast on the platform you're using to listen to us. It only takes a few seconds of your time, but it will bring a huge smile to our faces. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Right.
What is this process like? Like, would you say that as you're building these structures out of different plants, that
Mhm.
you're actually also building the connection between you and the volunteers?
Mm.
Can you actually see this happening for yourself?
100%.
Yeah.
And that's also one of these big moments and motivators that I've why I continue doing this. Like initially, it was me just building the Willow Dome. That was the idea. Let's build a Willow Dome in the middle of the city. Kind of selfish a little bit. Like I'm building this for myself. And then while building that dome, and this was part of my talk, was the bar manager who of in front of where we were building it came out and was like, I also planted willows. And then like we didn't even mean for it to become a community project, but
Hmm.
now it already is.
Yeah.
And then again, there's this thirst for people to get involved. And yeah, the actual community building that comes from building these structures, I would argue, is more important than the structures themselves. The structures
Hmm.
are beautiful. Like building this structure at Azora was great. Um, but by the end of it, we were all like, yeah, giving each other massages and giving each other like group therapy, and like it's like we became incredibly close. And
Hmm.
there were like one or two people who didn't even speak English there. And like I taught them how to basket weave so that they knew how to work with the materials. And by the end of it, this one girl, she was better at basket weaving than I was. And I just thought that was so funny because like
Hmm.
I taught her and now she's better than me and now she can go teach three other people. And there's this beautiful connection now that we
Yeah.
all sort of share.
Yeah, I think it is really amazing that you can actually use also these projects to, raise, to build communities, and also
Mhm.
use it as kind of maybe team building activity, even if you
Yeah.
have to. I think it's a good idea. But I think that the problem that I would have, I mean, because for me it sounds amazing, and as I'm listening to you, I would really like to engage in a guerrilla gardening project myself. But I have like zero skills and zero knowledge about gardening.
Hmm.
So what would you advise to a person like me who has like zero resources and no community for now, at least where I'm at?
Hmm. I would say start small. Like don't overcomplicate things, which I tend to do all the time. My projects keep on getting bigger and
Yeah.
bigger. But my friend is a really fun Instagram called uh, the Trashy Friends Club or something like that.
Hmm.
And it's people who just go around and pick up garbage in the neighborhood. And like that's so small. You don't really need anything. You need some gloves, garbage bag, and a bunch of people who want to get together. Um, but you can start with just like a packet of seeds. You could start with just the tree in front of your house. But we kind of get overwhelmed with like wanting to change the world,
Hmm.
and then that's a really big project. But if
Hmm.
you just focus on changing your block and then starting then to change your neighborhood and then starting to change your city, and then that's sort of the idea I have
Yeah.
um, behind
Hmm.
all of these projects is to just continue to build the future you want,
Hmm.
but know that it's going to take a really long time, and don't
Hmm.
put the pressure of like, well, we're going to completely regreen this entire block. No, we're going to
Hmm.
regreen this
Yeah.
one tree. That's
Yeah.
it. That's where we'll focus our energy, and you can get five people to get together for that.
Okay. And
um,
are there any like guerrilla gardening forums or groups or something that you could join, or you don't know about anything like that?
Nothing too substantial. I
Hmm.
know specifically for the Netherlands, they have these apps where you can track what nature is in
Hmm.
your cities. Like you can find out what trees are growing on your block, or like certain like kind of natured landmarks.
Hmm.
Um, but one of the things I would say that really helped me in the beginning, because I moved to the Netherlands. I knew nobody, and I don't think I could have started all of this on my own. I joined this company called Pluck.
Hmm.
They're like a CSA. They do like all these permaculture
Okay.
practices. But I would in your city, just go out and search like permaculture garden, and then just throw your time into that every
Hmm.
weekend, every free moment you have, until you don't have free moments anymore. Um, and then
Yeah.
you'll meet your community of people who are obsessed with the same thing you are,
Hmm. Yeah.
but that's the
I think
hardest
it's a
thing, is
good
finding that
advice. Yeah.
bit of
And have
community.
you, I was wondering if you've ever got a fine for the work that you're doing?
Nope. Funny enough, yeah, that was my biggest fear in the
Hmm.
beginning, but I'm still like 3 years in, so like in 10 years maybe. Um, but one of these amazing moments I had was I guerrilla gardened a little plot that was where a tree was supposed to be, um, and was like, whatever, okay. And then a couple months later, I got a message from somebody in the municipality, from the government. It was like, "Hey, we're actually going to be doing some water maintenance on this block. Do you mind moving your structure? And we're going to plant an actual tree there."
Mhm.
And I was like, "That is so beautiful." They could have just
Yeah.
ripped the whole thing out and burned it, and like, but they were
Mm.
like, "Hey, we see
Yeah,
value in this."
that's
Um,
really great.
I
Mm.
don't know if every city reacts that way. I think
Yeah,
Amsterdam
exactly. I
feels
was also,
really special.
I was
I
also
don't.
thinking about that, that when you're, you live in Amsterdam, so it's a very friendly city, I think, also
Mhm,
to all kinds of like bottom-up initiatives in
yeah.
general. Then I guess depending on the city, it might be different for
uh,
different people.
yeah.
Yeah, what about New York? Do you think that in New York it's as easy as in Amsterdam to do
No,
such things, or no?
unfortunately not.
Mm.
And yeah, we tried to renovate like a little abandoned lot right by somebody's house. We actually like broke into the fencing and opened
Mm.
it up and started cleaning up all the garbage and putting down soil and building this beautiful little path. And then the neighbor like came over and was just like, "Hey, what are you guys doing? If you make this pretty, then like homeless people are gonna try and come in here." And then
Okay.
and there's all these things like there's a weird like mentality around the third place,
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
least in New York, from my perception. If there everybody owns everything, or like like if even
Yeah.
if it's next to you. In
Hmm.
Amsterdam, people are very much like, okay, the parks are everybody's.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I think it's true. I really
yeah.
enjoy that perspective also.
But like
Um,
in Paris, my friend tried to build a gorilla garden, willow dome in the middle of like one park. And while he's building it, the police came up and were like, "You need to remove this right now."
oh,
Da, da, da,
really?
illegal. So it's different in each city.
Mm-hmm.
But start small,
Yeah.
poke like just like little bits, and then you'll know where your threshold is.
Hmm. And are there some projects that you would perhaps like to pursue, but you're afraid of?
Hmm. I think I wouldn't say afraid, but I just don't have the money for
Hmm.
it. Like so, like my next step in all of this is going to be applying for funding and grants and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
I'm still very like new. I'm a baby in this whole thing, so I would love to start applying for things so that they're more legitimate. Like I want to do things for the municipality. I want to do things for the government.
Hmm.
Um, and that's going to take a lot just for myself to start applying for these new grants and that sort of thing. But
Hmm.
that to me, that's the more scary thing. I can go out and plant things, spend my own money, no problem. But
Yeah.
to actually like go out and treat myself as a professional, that takes a
Hmm.
little bit more
Yeah,
dedication.
understand. And so, do you think because now you're still treating guerrilla gardening as a side thing, so your day job is still cooking,
Mhm.
do you think that eventually you will abandon your work as a chef? Would you like to make gardening your
Yeah.
day job?
I mean, I've gone back and forth about this.
Mhm.
I started off in chefing very passionate, and then I came sort of to this realization that sometimes when you make your passion your job, it can rob you of your passion because now you're doing
Mhm.
it for money. Now you're doing it for.
Yeah.
I still kind of like the idea that I could have my job and my passion be two separate things,
Mhm.
um, because it takes the pressure off of it. If I'm making art to sustain myself, then the art is now it's sort of taken on its own meaning. But
Mhm.
if you're just doing something for the sake of doing it, you end up yeah, doing it for the better reasons. You're not but honestly, yes, I would love for me to make all of my money from willow domes. Um, but I'm a realist. I know that that's not going to necessarily be possible, or maybe
Mhm.
that's a 10-year plan. But I'm in it for the long haul. I think also I'm a firm believer in just do what feels right. Pull at the cord until the whole thing unravels, because that's
Mhm.
very much what I'm doing right now. I don't know
Mhm.
why I'm doing it, but it feels
Yeah.
right, and I'm gonna keep on pulling at that cord, and things keep on surfacing because of it.
Mhm.
Like this interview, like TED Talk,
Yeah.
all these things are
Yeah.
happening because I went out and decided to plant something random,
Mhm.
like, it's great.
Yeah. So, are you not fulfilled anymore as a chef? Do you think it's something that's
Mm.
boring to you at the moment? Do you
Yeah,
like
I
exploration
would say that
maybe?
my passion for it has gotten a bit robbed.
Mhm.
I'm not as, yeah, I'm not as passionate about it. I still very much love cooking for my
Mhm.
friends and that sort of thing, which is why I'm so guarded with this newfound passion of mine. Because the last thing I want is to get swept up by making money on it and
Mm,
it becoming a job. Also, just but
yeah.
being a chef is a really hard life.
Mm,
Not to say gardening isn't, but there aren't the same like we need the table 10 now. Like I don't see people in
yeah.
the garden that stressed. We sit down, we have a cup of tea like halfway
Yeah.
through our day. I don't
Yes,
remember
definitely.
sitting very much at all when I
Mm,
was working as a chef.
mm.
But yeah.
Do you know if you've particularly affected some of the people that helped you or some of the people that are viewing your works? Have you
Mm,
heard about of any stories, that really motivated you to go forward?
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, some of my best friends now started like with with me. We've started doing these projects together. But now, and I don't want to take credit for anybody's work. I think what's cool about this is the fact that I'm inspiring other people. Like there's a guy in Antwerp who's now applying for a fund. Um, like I like this idea that I'm just giving people permission to
Mhm.
continue to try and push their own boundaries. But like I said, what I'm doing is in no way original. The
Mm.
Dutch have been making willow domes for years, but nobody knew about it.
Yeah,
So now I'm just giving a little bit more of a platform and giving some people more permission to
yeah,
go and try it. But I
yeah,
I
yeah.
would like to say yes. I'd like to
Mhm.
think that like I am having a positive effect on people's ability to go out and try these new things. Because
Well, I
people message
think
me
so.
all
I
the time
mean,
with
yeah,
questions like, "Hey, do it. How does this work? When do I plant this? Da da da." And there's not
mm,
a lot of information out there.
yeah.
It's
Well, you have motivated me,
yeah.
so maybe I would start. I will plan something, but from what I read, I have to wait until the spring, right? I think now you can't really plant anything in the winter.
Well, that's the beauty of the willows. So willows, it's from November to April. That's your
Okay.
window. So the exact opposite from everything else. So like
Hmm.
and usually in March, April, that's when you start planting all of your stuff for springtime and summer. So what's nice about my work is I get to capture all the gardeners who are like antsy waiting to get ready for spring. And
Hmm.
I can give them, that's why it was so easy to organize this project for this weekend. I'd sent out a message earlier this week, and then yeah,
Hmm.
14 people are like, "Ooh, me," because we're all
Hmm.
cooped up in our houses and want something to do.
But
The
because
hard
now you can cut the willows, right? But they
Yeah.
bloom later on, I guess, or do they
Mhm.
bloom now?
They bloom, in the spring.
Okay.
Like,
But now you cut them and you make the installations, and so then yeah.
yeah. From what
Okay.
I'm told, the best is to do it in November because
Hmm.
November, they get a second to sit, start to root, and then go to sleep. Right
Hmm.
now, they're already asleep, so we'll put them in the ground, and then they'll wake up and be like, "Oh, I'm here now," and then start growing.
Hmm. Okay.
But, they tend to do pretty well if you start very, very early in the season.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I don't know. I think to build a willow dome by myself now it would be quite complicated, but I will
It's not.
consider it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can send you a little blueprint on, like, how the easiest, way of doing it.
All right. You can. Yeah,
Yeah,
perhaps I'll do it.
yeah.
And are there some other guerrilla gardeners that are inspiring to you, that are an inspiration from which you've learned or
I
aspire to
wouldn't
be like them?
say, guerrilla gardeners specifically. I mean, there's a couple
Hmm.
of, social media people, like, there's this one guy who, like, dresses up as a bee in San Francisco and, like, sprinkles flowers everywhere, and I just love that
So
idea.
cool.
He just,
Yeah.
like, goes around on a one wheel, and, like, anywhere he sees empty soil, he just sprinkles some local wildflower seeds.
Hmm.
That kind of stuff really inspires me. And then there's also this artist, Will Beckers. He does these beautiful installations out of willows. Um, they're not always living, but they like sort of snake through
Hmm.
uh, like this. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but like the inspiration I get is really like these things that make you go like, oh wow, like how did they come up with that?
Hmm.
There's like another German artist that his I find his work so moving and so inspiring that but he doesn't he's retired, he doesn't work anymore. So a lot of what I'm doing and it's hard to get into the it's hard to get through to these people because they're doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to do with my work is to just make it very palatable, very easy for people to understand how you literally are just going down, cutting a stick, putting it in the ground,
Hmm.
making something. It's hard to wrap your mind around. So I've been doing a lot of reverse engineering and trying to
Hmm.
figure things out on my own, and
Hmm.
then paying it forward and saying, all right, so this was the mistake I made.
Hmm.
Here's how you can do it. Now
Hmm.
I know the season is November to March. I didn't
Hmm.
always know that, which is why the sculptures I built in June all died. So
Okay.
learn from my mistakes.
Yeah, but I think it's important to mention also because from your stories I got the feeling that whatever you do it works perfectly fine. You plant a tree, it grows. Like you build a
No.
willow dome, it stays there forever.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to actually learn that it's not the case and that very
Mhm.
often these projects they die because I guess this can be demotivating for some. But since you're
But
sharing this experience, I think it's the natural process, right? There are some things that will go on living and some of the other projects would die.
but just the same, there's beauty in the failure. And that's
Mm.
what, again, I want to encourage whoever's listening or even myself to just go out and fail. Like there's no bad part in going out, trying to plant a tree and it not surviving.
Yeah.
It's not like you didn't do anything now, because now
Mm.
you know, okay, June doesn't work. And even more so, like this piece that we haven't really talked about is this ownership that you can have over your city when you do something like that.
Yeah.
Like in my talk, I spoke about the this one little plot where I built this willow table, and the willow table died and it got removed by the government. And then I forgot about that place, and then came back a couple weeks later and saw that neighbors had left like a little garden in that space, like 20 different random pots, different shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
But this before, like a year ago, was just a sandy pit of nothing, and
Yeah, this
people
is
park their bikes
beautiful.
on top of
Mm.
it. And now it's like a garden. I didn't even touch it. But like
Yeah.
if I could do more things like that, and that came from me making a sculpture that died.
Yeah.
Like so imagine if you made a beautiful sculpture that lived. Like I mean, like that. It's just don't discount yourself if something fails. I think
Mm.
failure
I
is
think
the
yeah, I think it's a very
important part.
important message, and I think it's
Yeah,
very important to me also.
don't
And
fail.
and yeah, I'm really happy that we also touched upon that and the ownership of the city, which is true. It was really touching in your speech,
Hmm.
and we didn't mention yet here. Well, I think we're going to head towards the end of our conversation here.
Cool.
But before we do, I have two last questions that I ask to all of my guests. So the first one is, what is happiness for you?
Oh, now that's something I'm gonna have to think about for a second.
Hmm.
What is happiness for me? Hmm. Well, it's funny because happiness is one of the reasons why I moved to the Netherlands. Um, New York is a very ambition-driven place. A lot of happiness is derived from how successful you are. Um, but since moving here, and even before moving here, I really wanted to reframe my idea of success is how happy I am. So I'm completely fine being poor, maybe not poor, but having enough income to sustain myself, not ever really being rich, having an amazing family of friends, and being connected with nature and grounded. Um, I think happiness for me is feeling like you have a place in this world without having to um, change anything about yourself,
Hmm.
and to just kind of lean into um, yeah, this connection with nature. I think I'm still trying to. I think that's part of my practice is trying to understand. Um, but happiness to me, I guess, is to embrace that childlike wonder that I've always had in the
Yeah.
world, and to embrace the weird. To
Yeah.
embrace the
I think this is a
strange.
good statement, yeah, to
Yeah,
embrace the weird. And very often we
yeah,
do not have the courage, right, to do that because
yeah.
you want to kind of fit in and be normal. And
Free the
sometimes
weird.
just
Yeah, like my friend used the analogy of like running for a train. Like sometimes we don't run for the train because we're worried about like, oh, these random people are gonna think I'm silly because I'm like running to the train. Doesn't really matter. Who cares?
no,
Or like
yeah.
you're at a club or something, and you're standing because you want to look like cool.
Mm.
Like, who are you doing that for? Like, no,
Yeah.
like be a weirdo, like be
Yeah,
funky, be
definitely. Definitely.
weird.
And in the end, like people, they don't really care. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's only you, very often, it's only you and your mind, which is actually judgmental and not the others, I think.
yeah. I've become very obsessed with this idea of like how we construct our own realities in our
Yeah.
head. So
Yeah.
if you walk into a room and you think everybody hates you, it doesn't matter if they hate you or not,
Hmm.
because you've constructed that reality in your head. They do hate you now. But
Yeah.
if you walk into the room or if you walk into the world and you think it's this beautiful place full of magic and wonder and whimsy, it is
Mm.
actually full of all of those things.
Yeah, it's kind of
So,
true. And then
yeah.
about the embracing the weird, I think it's related like to the amount of courage that we might have, and courage is actually what would drive you then to pursue such project as yours, or as my podcast, where I also need to like be
Put
courageous
yourself out
to,
there.
yeah,
Yeah.
to go out there, and talk about things and invite people and so on. So I guess this is a very important and nice statement that you've shared.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
okay,
So,
and so my second question,
mhm.
unless you want to add something.
Well, no, just really quick, like,
Yeah.
because people ask me, "Why do you call yourself that weird plant guy
Hmm.
on Instagram?" And it's not necessarily because I consider myself weird, but the norms around we do things this
Yeah.
specific way, that's how I'm weird. It's just different, and I challenge people to go out and do things different, take things apart, put them back together
Mm.
differently,
Yeah.
be weird, because
Mm.
that's how you have innovation.
Yeah.
Fail.
It's a
And
great name. So yeah, so to this last question that I have, that I am asking all my guests is, do you believe that one person can change the world? And if yes, how? And if not, then why
Mm.
not?
Yeah, I do. That's a complicated one. But I do think that every individual has an impact, and it goes kind of back to this idea of like weaving, like or teaching somebody a specific task. Like that person in Hungary who didn't speak any English and became better at weaving than me. She can now teach three people, and they can teach three people. And so I really do think that one person can have a difference, but not that that one person is going to change the world, but that one person can give permission to three people, and they can give permission to nine people. And it's just this like insurmountable, like it just keeps on going up and up. So I
Mm.
think, yeah, my answer is yes, but
Hmm.
that doesn't mean that you're like some dictarian or a dictator who's going to change the world. But if you can inspire others,
Yeah.
then you have a tremendous effect. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, about the impact. Have you seen the film Pay It Forward?
No, I haven't.
No, it's about this idea. It's a heartbreaking film, and it's an old one. I think it's from the 90s, but it's one of my favorites. It's really inspirational. I mean, I saw it when I was a kid, and it's about this boy who gets an assignment at school. It's with Kevin Spacey, I think.
Hmm.
I'm not sure about that though, but I think so. And he gets an assignment to do three good deeds, and then like these other people are supposed to do the other three good deeds, and so on and so on. And they are
Hmm.
supposed to like make an impact. So I guess that this kind of relates to what you've been saying just now.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
doesn't need to be as bold as like going out and guerrilla gardening. It can literally be like, all right, every day I wake up, I'm going to try and smile at three or four people.
Mm.
That that's one thing that I found really funny. Like when you're having a really good day, it's funny, like the world smiles at you,
Yeah.
but it's because you're smiling at everybody else. And
Yeah.
like you can almost imagine what like a we always joke about like we're mycelium, like we're fungi.
Mhm.
There's this mycelial network that exists underneath everything. Why you and I get along, why you resonate with certain people, but we're all sort of connected. So if my positivity rubs off on you, then
Mm.
you're going to be positive, and that's going to rub off. Like it again. This sort of underlying positivity doesn't even
Yeah.
need to be an actual thing that you do, but just going into the world without feeling like, oh, everything's hopeless and
Mm.
nothing's going to work, because that also
Mm.
rubs off on people. So
Yeah.
I like to I'm an idealist, in that sense. I think that we can save the world by smiles.
Yeah, I would
Been
like to
fun.
believe that too. I think I do believe that too. But then, of course, there are worse days which can also happen. But
I mean, you're
in
in the
general, I
joyful
think.
podcast, so I don't think you can be in that boat of.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, so thank you very much, Jasper. I really enjoyed our
My pleasure.
conversation. It was lovely to meet with you and to exchange with you, to get to know your perspective, your point of view. I hope that you've inspired some of my listeners. I hope that they will engage in guerrilla gardening projects. I hope that I will engage in such projects myself. And if I do, then I will let you know. And yeah, enjoy the year 2025 as we're
Oh,
recording
it's gonna
in
be a
January.
crazy year. No, and thank you. I mean, honestly, having these conversations helps me kind of reflect on why I'm doing all of these things.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I encourage you to keep on doing this because it.
thank you.
I now feel so much more inspired. Like, okay, yeah, like that, I am doing something important, and you've
Okay,
given me
cool.
permission to
Yeah.
feel that.
Mm,
So yeah, really, thank you. And
okay.
yeah, 2025 is gonna be a hell of a year, quarter century. It's
Yeah.
big things are happening. But
Mm,
yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate
thank
it,
you.
Joy.
Thank you. Bye. And I will see you back soon at Joyful. Cheers.